In this part of our course, we will be talking about the development of postmodernist Russian literature in 1990s and 2000s, and especially about the most popular Russian author, Viktor Pelevin, who was born on November 22, 1962. This writer is unique in many respects, or at least in 3 of them. Firstly, I would say he is the one who has come nearest to the implementation of Leslie Fidler's slogan, "Cross the borders," between pop fiction and sophisticated literature. Pelevin is obviously a philosopher who incarnates his not easy to grasp worldview in the form of fiction, and at the same time writes funny and easy-to-read prose, which makes readers of all ages and backgrounds laugh, which is very funny. Moreover, despite all philosophical depths, his works always address not hot contemporary political and technological issues. Secondly, one of the unusual features of Pelevin, for Russia at least, is that he is a Buddhist. I can hardly recollect one more such a case in all the history of Russian literature. And as any Buddhist, Pelevin simultaneously teaches and does not teach his readers. Actually, the source of many of his images and tropes we should seek in Chinese and Japanese religious and philosophical traditions. And thirdly, that's the feature we are going to discuss right now. We almost do not know the biography of this famous writer. He lives a reclusive life and avoids publicity. And it makes him enigmatic and even more interesting for his readers. But before starting the ball rolling, I would like to remind you that there are several texts in this course which I recommend you to read. In this case, it's one of the earliest novellas by Pelevin, Amon-Ra, in English translation by Andrew Bromfield, which is not so big but very deep and contains all the motifs of later Pelevin's works. And I offer you to read at least one short story of your choosing. You can take a collection of stories called The Blue Lantern, the year 2000, or A Werewolf Problem in Central Russia, and other stories published in the year 2003, also in Andrew Bromfield's translation. And choose one story, for example, The Anthology of Childhood, or Prince of Gosplan, or any other. And now I'll try to say a few words about Pelevin's life and his role in Russian culture of 1990s, 2000s. First of all, he was extremely popular. The critic Sergei Belikov even reframed one Russian proverb, Russian wink word: a fruit, an apple; a poet, Pushkin; contemporary Russian writer, Viktor Pelevin. It was true, at least for 1990s. Pelevin has reached his acme, his highest point in that time, and we will talk about some reasons of that later. And in 1990s, he played a role not only of a literary star, he never was a star in Hollywood sense, since he always avoided journalists, but of a cult writer, comparable with Benedict Yerofeev. By the way, Pelevin wrote a very interesting essay about Yerofeev. It was a cult practiced by young generation, the one he called later Generation P, a unique last Soviet and first post-Soviet generation which believed in nothing. Nobody believed in communist ideology, of course, but after several years of wild capitalism, nobody also believed in free market or democracy or liberal values as a panacea of all troubles. And here appears a writer who does not teach anyone anything, or rather teaches some empty, his favorite concept. And he is not a preacher, although he obviously preaches. Is Pelevin a postmodernist writer or not? It's not an easy question to answer. On the one hand, in his works, one can find a lot of postmodernist features, which we were discussing in the previous lectures. They are definitely full of quotes, and many of these quotes are auto-quotes, his own quotes. He endlessly repeats several motifs in his works, and the critics do not like it, of course. Each review to a new Pelevin's novel, a collection of stories, begins with the claim that the author has written himself out and there is nothing new in his new book. But on the other hand, it means that he has one major idea and wants to communicate it to his audience. And he is doing it in a variety of ways. As for postmodernism as destruction, Pelevin, unlike Sorokin, is not a literary exterminator. He is rather a builder, but the builder of imaginary or virtual worlds. Actually, he is not interested in depicting reality. He is much more interested in solving the philosophical problem of this reality's existence. And his main subject is human mind, with all its games and illusions. Reality in his works is just a projection of the inner self, and it is deceptive by definition. All his life, Victor Pelevin has been exploring and cataloging all possible kinds of deceptions. And his public image, or rather unpublic image, corresponds with such intentions of his work. For more than 30 years, Pelevin has been building his image of the hermit writer who escapes interviews and publicity, wears black glasses, who believes that his texts speak for themselves, and do not need any comments. But actually, in his early years, he had given a lot of interviews, which could be compiled to a huge volume. But in recent 10 years, it's really absent from public field. But unlike D.J. Salinger, Pelevin publishes one book a year regularly, and it's his way of communicating with the reader. Now let's talk about his life, or rather some scattered facts we know for sure about this strange person. Now look to this slide, where Pelevin himself wrote the beginning of his autobiography. I, Pelevin Viktor Olegovich, was born on November 22, 1962, in Moscow. In 1979, I have graduated from the high school number 31 and have entered the Moscow Energetic University and got my Bachelor of Science in 1985. In 1987, I have entered the graduate school of the same university, where I remained until 1989. In the same year, I have entered the Gorky Literary Institute, and at the same time was writing for the Face to Face magazine and other Moscow-based magazines and newspapers. What can be added to these scarce lines? Firstly, that the high school number 31 was one of the best in the city and in the whole country, where many children of famous actors and party leaders have been studying. Pelevin's parents, however, did not belong to the Soviet elite. His father was just an ordinary military officer and a teacher at the university's military department. And that was the school with advanced study of English, and Pelevin mastered it very well. He said in the interview that he edited his English translations himself. The school is situated in the very center of Moscow, just behind the new building of Moscow Art Theater on the Tverskoy Boulevard. This region is actually Pelevin's Moscow. Many scenes in his works take place in the vicinities of this place. He lived here for a long time before moving to the Moscow suburban district of Chertanovo. Besides the school, in this district the famous Gorky Literary Institute is situated. It was the only one special university in the USSR where creative writing was taught. But Pelevin himself told that this education was useless for him as a writer. All the students there wanted just to get some connections, he said, and he did not need it at all. Pelevin's life in 1980s is well known from his mates' recollections. It was a circle of esoterics, the people who were avidly reading any esoteric literature and creating improbable theories about the universe. Some of these people later became the prototypes of his heroes, especially in the novel Buddha's Little Finger. The journalistic work did not influence too much to his later writings. He wrote small articles, frequently unnamed, and at the end of 1989 he had published a first short story. But at that time he worked mostly as an editor and translator in the small publishing house called Myth, specialized in esoteric literature. For this company he had edited several volumes of the works by Carlos Castaneda, an American best-selling esoteric writer who described his training in shamanism in Mexico. His books had influenced Pelevin very much. In the beginning of 1990s, Pelevin published one after another several books, including the one you are supposed to read, the Amon-Ra novel, and they brought glory to him. He worked a lot in that time. His friends recollected that he could write for 10 or more hours in a day without interruptions and without deleting a word. And all his works were printed immediately. Amon-Ra was published in 1992 in Znamya or Banner literary magazine, and the next year he published his first collection of short stories, Blue Lantern, sold in 100,000 copies. This collection brought to Pelevin his first prize, the Anti-Booker Prize. And the rest is silence. We cannot add something to it about mature years of Victor Pelevin for sure. Almost all we know are rumors and guesses. He writes his books and publishes one book a year. He is practicing Buddhist, and he had spent several months in South Korean Buddhist monastery, for example. But we cannot tell for sure where does he live, what is he doing besides his writings, what are his personal circumstances. We can just read books. Let's talk about them in further detail. Thank you.